Welcome back to our second episode of our relationship series. I'm so excited to chat with Pastor Brian Goodwin and his wife Natalie. Today we're going to talk about marriage, friendships, community, family, and how to keep your marriage fresh when you have young children. Stay with us, it's going to be a great chat. Pastor Brian and Natalie, it is so good to chat with you today. How are you?
Good.
Yeah, pretty good.
Pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know, many people have seen you around the church, and I'm sure they've spent time with you, whether in discipleship, at a class, or listening to one of your sermons. But I realize that they may not know much about Natalie or even the story of how you two met. And so I just wanted to start off asking, how did you two meet?
How did we meet?
You want to take it? Seems like a long time ago.
Well, I guess I can start and fill in the gaps.
Okay.
We went to college together. We went to UNC Chapel Hill, right? Go Heels.
Did you ever think about that?
About where I went to college?
Yeah.
I hope not. We went to college together, and we actually had a class together, and we didn't even realize it. It's kind of not part of the story, but we had a Philosophy 101 class together that we didn't even know we had because those classes are so huge. And then we had both kind of come out of long-term relationships that weren't really good for us, and it was senior year, and we had a mutual friend who decided that we should be introduced.
Wow.
And so we actually we got set up on a blind date at the Red Bicycle Coffee Shop in Chapel Hill. And so, yeah, I got there first and remember her walking in.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. What were your first thoughts when you saw her walking in on that blind date?
So, absolute honesty, I thought, this is going to sound really cheesy, but my first thought was, this girl's out of my league.
Wow.
I really did. She had this fuzzy pink jacket on, and your hair was like half as short as it is now, and you had those blue contacts that made your eyes really pop. And so I remember you walking in, and I kind of had to do like a double take because my friend had given me a picture, and I was like, oh wow, that's her. I don't think I'm gonna be able to do this. I don't think she's gonna like me. But yeah, that was the first impressions.
And Natalie, how about you? What were your thoughts going into the blind date, and then what were your thoughts when you first met Pastor Brian?
Right. I was a little nervous. Not gonna lie, I had some friends waiting,
Yeah.
in the parking lot in case he turned out not to be a nice guy. I did live right behind the coffee shop at the time. But I remember my first thought was that you were funny. You came in, he had a hat on, and then he took it off, and then he had some crazy story about how you lost your hair. Do you remember that? You told me you'd save puppies from a burning building. I was like, there's no way that's right. And you started laughing.
I don't remember that.
Yeah, you don't? No. But yeah, I just remember thinking that you were really funny and just really, really genuine. And I think we ended up sitting and talking for 4 hours.
Yeah.
The first time I rode.
Wow.
I was so
A cup of cold coffee at that point.
impressed. Even just after just the initial slow-mo walk into the coffee shop, and I thought she was incredible. But when she sat down and started talking, she had this crazy hoarse voice. You had
It sounded like a man.
like pneumonia is what it
Yeah.
sounded like. And I know you were self-conscious about it. But and at first I thought what's wrong? Is there something? Is she sick or? And the reason was because she had literally just gotten back from a weekend leading these girls at a Christian a missions camp.
Wow.
And so she's been yelling and playing with these teenage girls all weekend. And so what I thought was kind of a funny sound to her voice was all of a sudden I just admired her more because of it. It was a really cool. That sticks out to me.
Wow, and it just goes to show that, I know some people they're afraid of blind dates, so they're like, no, I can't do it. But something really great can come out of a blind date, and you just never know who God is going to place in your path. That is such an awesome story. And so how long have you been married now?
Almost 7 years.
Wow.
In May.
7 years. In those 7 years, what have you learned about marriage and love?
Well, I started the last question.
I think it's hard work.
Yeah.
It is legitimately hard work, and I know that people say that all the time, and I think that you have to learn that love is a choice. It is definitely not a feeling, and I think if you relied on your feelings, it it would go bad really quickly, because there's certainly seasons of joy and fun, but there's also seasons of frustration and hard times. And I think that, if you're making the commitment to be married to someone, then you have to make the choice to love them every day, whether they deserve it or not. And I think that's something that you have to make that commitment to.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I mean, love is hard work, and marriage is hard work, and it's a commitment that you have to make. And I think that's what makes love so special, and what makes love this thing that even in pop culture, right there, that love is just the pinnacle of emotions, and everybody wants love, and all you need is love,
Yeah.
But what makes love so special isn't the easy part of it. I mean, it's really easy to, have a girl walk into a coffee shop and fall in love. Right? That part's really easy, and that's not what makes it special or worthwhile, really. It's the hard days where you wake up and you're like, I don't feel, I'm just mad at this person, or I'm frustrated, or life is just hard, and my selfish, sinful self can think of a million reasons why it's their fault. But that's not what I'm going to choose to be. That's not how I'm going to choose to act, because I love her.
Yeah, that's really good. And so it's like it started off on a blind date, and now we're 7 years later, and you have so far, let's talk about children. You have a daughter, Naomi. How old is she?
She turned 2 at the end of September, so she's a couple months over 2.
Wow.
Yeah.
Almost now.
In April, she'll be 2.5.
And I'm sure she keeps you busy.
Yes. And then we'll have our second daughter in April. So yeah.
And so they'll be about 2 years apart. And so, essentially you'll have like the 2 under 2, as they say. And I know, like, for many couples, it can be really challenging. We come off the honeymoon phase. We're really enjoying each other. We're excited about having children, but then once our kids come, that does change things. Our time is different. Our emotions change. Our body changes. Our finances change. And sometimes our marriages can go on the back burner. But what are some ways that you've found to keep your marriage a priority, considering having a young daughter and another child on the way?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And
it's hard.
By no means do I think we've mastered that.
Yeah.
We are becoming
It's a work in
every day
progress. Yeah.
in regard to being husbands and wives. I mean, I think there's some practical stuff that you can do that's probably a little cliche, but it's cliche because it works. I mean, we try as much as we're able to have a date day.
Yeah.
Once a week if we can, or once every other week if not. And a lot of times that doesn't have to look like we're going out somewhere. Sometimes that's just popping popcorn and having a movie night.
Right.
But being intentional about that time.
Yeah.
It's not just let's crash on the couch, whip out our iPhones and kind of veg out for a while.
Right.
So
Or even times where you've met me, you've come to Chapel Hill and met me for lunch while I'm at work during lunch break. At least an hour is, it's certainly different eating over our own conversations than with a 2-year-old.
yeah, just finding and redeeming those spaces where you can carve out some time without the kids.
Yeah.
Kids.
Yeah.
I think that's really important to maintain that.
And I think it's so great that you found creative ways to do that, even just such as like, you may not always be able to have that evening dinner date, but you can meet each other for lunch, without kids. So, and then like you said, having that time on the weekends or on an evening, once the kids go to sleep, just sitting on the couch and talking and sharing and being intentional. So thank you for that. And so, of course, as we know, marriage isn't the only relationship that we're going to find ourselves in, and neither will parenthood be. We're faced with so many other relationships that we have to deal with. How do we keep the centrality of Christ in our relationships with people?
Thoughts? Centrality of Christ in our relationships. Yeah, I think oftentimes, even in marriage, we read a really good book together. Who wrote that book? The one with friendship. It's like love, friendship, and I don't know. We'll make it available on a resources page or something. But it was a great book, and one of the things that I really liked about it that was different from other books was its emphasis on friendship. because marriage is first and foremost, it's a friendship, and,
Yeah.
and we have other friendships, and that aspect of friends in a day when things are so often reduced to, a different kind of friends, like a Facebook friend or some, a Twitter follower or something like that. Friendship is just something that's to be coveted, and I think in order to have a meaningful and abiding friendship, I think that that again is grounded on love, a different kind of love, but still love. And in order for you to be able to love genuinely, I think you have to know Jesus.
That's good.
Yeah, I was just say, I think it stems from a heart issue. I think whatever is in your heart is going to overflow into your friendships and the relationships that you have. And when you meet someone, it should be pretty evident within the first, 10, 15, 20 minutes of, maybe honestly where their heart is, where their priorities are. I think that if your heart is not centered in Christ, then your relationships aren't going to be either.
Yeah.
And so I think it has to come from that.
Yeah, so I think that centrality of Christ aspect, it just, you've got to be very careful that what the friendships you have, the relationships that you're holding, that you're not trying to love people towards Jesus. You're not trying to love people for something, for Jesus even, but you're loving them from Jesus.
Yeah.
It comes out of that abiding relationship you have with Jesus.
Yeah, that's really good, because sometimes I hear people say, I'm just having such a hard time making friends. And sometimes they'll try to, in ways like, blame it on other people. But I really like that you took it back to looking within ourselves, and then also, just pointing towards Jesus. So that was really good. I know we're in February now, and so we're just, we're getting out of the holiday season where a lot of us were around family. And, for some people, they did experience conflict during the holidays, or maybe they had to be around somebody that they had conflict with. What are some ways that we can deal with family conflict?
Yeah, it's a great question. You have much, much more experience with family than I do.
Right. We always laugh because I come from, I have two sisters, and then my mom and my dad both had several siblings, so I have a huge extended family. We've always stayed very close. And we all live in North Carolina.
Getting married was, Thanksgiving for me was like 5 people tops.
Oh, that's great.
And then we're dating. The first Thanksgiving we were together, we were actually engaged. And it was what, 45 or something?
Which was
Wow.
nothing for me, because that's what I grew up with. But for him, I had to make family charts and trees, so he knew.
So you truly gained a family.
Yeah. So
Right.
you're the expert on family.
Right. And I think that I've been very, very blessed to have a family that we generally have not had a lot of conflicts. I think maybe me and my sisters, growing up, but overall we've had great relationships, and I think it just goes back to what we're talking to. I think that you can't control what other people do, unfortunately, and there's only so much, but you can control your response. And so I think that it really helps. And now this is easier said than done, a lot of times looking back, but just kind of maybe seeing where they're coming from. I think a lot of times we're very quick to judge people, like, why do they do that? Then maybe taking a step back and realizing, looking at their situation, do they have things going on in their life to why they're stressed out, and maybe they're responding
That's
that way.
good.
And I think a lot just comes from trying to be loving to other people. 'Cause
Yeah.
dealing with other people is hard. It really is.
Yeah, people are complicated and painful.
Very much so.
Yeah. I will say this really quickly. I think that you got to pray for people too.
Absolutely.
You got to pray for your family, especially the family that you don't like. And that goes for friends too.
That's
But
true.
the people that you don't like that are causing you conflict, pray for them, because it'll change their heart, but it'll also change your heart towards them. So
That's true.
pray.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
good. And I know sometimes we harbor so much unforgiveness, but as Christians we are called to not walk in unforgiveness,
Right.
with people. So I think this is all really good.
It can be hard.
Very hard.
Very hard.
Very. I know that, especially at our church, Vertical Church, we often use the term biblical community.
Yeah.
What is that?
Yeah. I think biblical community is something that we naturally, organically form into. It is. It takes effort to not be in community, to some extent. So when we say biblical community, I think that we're talking about community that is centered around the gospel. It's anchored in Jesus, and it takes on the characteristics of the community of Christ followers that we see in the Bible.
That's good.
And so we do our best to try and create environments where that kind of community can flourish.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Good.
biblical.
What would you say are some of the benefits of being in biblical community?
Right. Yeah.
Oh, I think one is you get to fellowship with other people and
Mhm.
learn. I think one of our favorite experiences in our married life was when we were living in Tokyo. What I would consider our biblical community consisted of, it was a lot of what college age students for the most part, but from how many countries would you say? 10, 15 different countries but they were all Christians.
Wow.
And just learning from them and their experiences. And I think you got to see kind of different facets of what it looked like, represented from all different backgrounds. And I think that in itself was really neat to see different people's perspectives.
Yeah.
We all love Jesus, but it shows in a different way.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah,
that-
and I think being part of a biblical community too is a lot of communities exist to be kind of self-supporting and self-sustaining, but a biblical community exists for a common purpose.
Mhm.
We know that our identity as followers of Jesus, it doesn't stop with us. We're called onto this purpose for our lives to be ambassadors for Jesus, and as a part of these biblical communities, we're doing that together.
Yeah.
And even in a lot of churches that do Sunday schools and small groups and things like that, I think there's a big component of biblical community that's missing because those groups don't, the people in those groups don't necessarily allow one another to speak with accountability.
Yeah. And so I thought it was really good that you brought up like some of the obstacles to biblical community, like accountability. How can we overcome that fear of accountability that so many people have?
Yeah. So I think one of the caveats you have to put on accountability, and even when we try and teach people about this and introduce people to biblical community at Vertical, we are very specific about calling it loving accountability. It's not, the purpose is not so that, I can go to D group and say, hey, I failed. This happened Wednesday night. I didn't do the goal that I set. And I came and said, hey guys, I didn't do this. And it wasn't so that everybody else could say, oh, you should feel terrible, feel bad about yourself,
Right.
you're such a bad Christian. It was just so that they could then ask me questions like, well, what happened? Is there how can we help you
Yeah.
this week make that happen? What are you going to do differently? And so when you start getting that kind of love, that's the same kind of love that, as parents we want to give to our kids,
Yeah.
right? We want to challenge them. We want to hold them accountable to grow. That's really, again, that's hard love,
Yeah,
not
it
just
is.
easy love.
Yeah. It's really hard to grow, I think, when you don't have someone holding you accountable. It's a dangerous place to be in when you're the only person holding yourself accountable.
That's
Because
good.
other people, especially people who love you, see things in your life that you don't even see in yourself. Brian is much more equipped to see things that I'm doing than I am, honestly. And so I think it's so important to have people who love you and who genuinely want to see you grow, and I think you need that
Yeah.
accountability.
But I will say this too on that note, it's very important, and we found this in our marriage, that there are places where I can see things in Natalie that she can't see in herself, or vice versa. But at the same time, they're not really places that it's healthy for me to speak into or
Yeah.
to challenge her on. When it's related to our marriage, it's really hard for me to say, hey, I think you could improve on this. That doesn't come across that well. So that biblical community with some other people, some other ladies,
Right.
some other guys, that's really critical.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah. And so it's been great just to talk about, your marriage and, your experience with having young children. We were able to talk about family and friendships and even biblical community. And just like summing it up, it could be for any area of relationships. If you could pick one piece of relationship advice to give to people, what would it be?
Just one.
It's going to be hard for you to nail down to one sentence.
It is. Do you have one?
You go first.
Oh, great.
But if you have more than one, it's okay.
No. Challenge accepted. Now, I think if I could say one thing, just general, without knowing somebody's situation, and I think this applies even beyond marriage, beyond relationships, to personal self-discipline. I think you've you've got to remember that there are things that we have to do, even though we don't like them, even though we don't want to do them, even if we never develop a love for those things, they're good for you.
Yeah.
You do them because they're right and because they're good for you. That applies to oftentimes the spiritual disciplines when we're seeking the Lord. It applies a lot of times in marriage and relationships and parenting. And I think you've got to recognize that a mark of maturity is understanding I'm doing this even though I don't like it, even though I don't want to do it, because I know the results will be good for me, for my family, for my relationship with the Lord and with everyone else.
That's good.
Yeah.
See, I think mine is along the same lines, and I think it's when you're in a relationship with anyone, whether it's a friend, a spouse, is remembering why do you have that relationship, and ultimately, we know how to relate to people because Christ first loved us, and I think that if you can take a step back and base everything, your relationships on that, sometimes it's a hard pill to swallow because you don't really want to like people, but I think remembering, taking a step back and remembering like these relationships that we have are a blessing and we can use those for good. And I think just remembering, okay, I'm showing love through this relationship. How can I do that?
Wow, that's really good. I just want to thank you for your time today and just, sharing your wisdom and knowledge and experiences. I know many people are going to be blessed from what you've shared. Before we go, would you just share what are some ways that people can get into biblical community at Vertical Church?
Yeah.
You're
Why are you looking at me?
Pastor.
She's like, well, that's your job. So. Well, yeah. I mean, we try to make that as easy as possible, I guess. But the first thing you really need to do is, like, if you want to relate to people, if you want to have relationships with people, you need to open yourself up to some people. And so start there. Start by 10 seconds of insanity, we say, of walking up to somebody and shaking a hand and saying, hey, my name's Brian, I've never met you. But beyond that, we have missional communities and discipleship groups. Missional communities are all about fellowship and evangelism, and discipleship groups are really about accountability, discipling, and both of those serve unique and equally critical functions in the life of a believer, I think. The easiest place to get started is in a missional community. So you can find a map of them all on our website and just dive into one. And then with discipleship groups, oftentimes those form out of those missional communities. And people get connected and one person kind of says, I'm going to lead this. And you get to have that really deep. That's where accountability really happens. So those are vital. You can always send us an email or just come talk to us on a Sunday and we'll help you get connected if you want to get connected. But that's the first thing. I think you have to want to get